John Kiriako, why are you going to jail? Explain the plea deal you made with the government.
Well, thanks, first of all, for having me and giving me the opportunity to explain. I'm going to prison ostensibly for violating the Intelligence Identities Protection Act of 1982. I believe, and my supporters believe, that this, however, was not a case about leaking. This was a case about torture. And I believe I'm going to prison because I blew the whistle on torture. I've been a thorn in the CIA's side since that interview in 2007 in which I said that waterboarding was torture and that it was official U.S. government policy. And I think finally the Justice Department caught up with me.
Jesselyn Radack, let me just bring you into the conversation to explain what the Intelligence Identities Protection Act is. Your client, John Kiriako, it's been invoked in his case for the first time in 27 years?
That's correct. In fact, there have only been 2 convictions under the Intelligence Identities Protection Act, which was enacted to prevent cases like Philip Agee, not things like John Kiriako. It was to prevent the revealing of covert identities for profit or to aid the enemy. In this case, John confirmed the name of a torturer to a journalist, which makes Neil McBride's statement all the more hypocritical because the biggest leaker of classified information, including sources and methods and undercover identities, has been the U.S. government.
John Kiriako, explain what it is that you were trying to expose. Explain what you were involved with. Talk about Abu Zubaydah, your involvement in the finding of him, and then the course you took, where your conscience took you.
Sure. In 2002, I was the chief of counterterrorism operations for the CIA in Pakistan. And my job was to try to locate al-Qaeda fighters or al-Qaeda leaders and capture them, to turn them over to the Justice Department and have them face trial. That was the original idea, not to have them sit in Cuba for the next decade. But we caught Abu Zubaydah. He was shot 3 times by Pakistani police as he was trying to escape from his safe house, and I was the first person to have custody of him, to sit with him. We spoke to each other extensively. I mean, talked about everything from September 11th to poetry that he had been writing, to his family, and then he was moved on to a secret prison after that. Once I got back to headquarters, I heard that he had been subject to harsh techniques, then euphemistically called enhanced interrogation techniques, and I was asked by one of the leaders in the CIA's counterterrorist center if I wanted to be trained in the use of these techniques. I told him that I had a moral problem with them, and I did not want to be involved. So fast forward to 2007. By then, Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International had reported that al-Qaeda prisoners had been tortured, and ABC News called and said that they had information that I had tortured Abu Zubaydah. I said that was absolutely untrue. I was the only person who was kind to Abu Zubaydah, and I had never tortured anybody. So they asked me to go on their show and defend myself. I did that, and in the course of the interview, I said that not only was the CIA torturing prisoners, but that it was official U.S. government policy. This was not the result of some rogue CIA officer just beating up a prisoner every once in a while. This was official policy that went all the way up to the President of the United States.
And so what happened after that in 2007, once you gave this interview? Can you explain what happened to you and to your family?
Sure. Within 24 hours, the CIA filed what's called a crimes report against me with the Justice Department, saying that I had revealed classified information, which was the torture program, and asking for an investigation with an eye toward prosecuting me. The Justice Department decided at the time that I had not revealed classified information, that the information was already in the public domain, but immediately, within weeks, I was audited by the IRS. I've been audited by the IRS every single year since giving that interview in 2007. But a more important bit of fallout from that interview was that every time I would write an op-ed, every time I would give a television interview or give a speech at a university, the CIA would file a crimes report against me, accusing me of leaking additional classified information. Each time, the Justice Department determined that I did not leak any classified information. In fact, I would get those op-eds and those speeches cleared by the CIA's Publications Review Board in advance. Then the CIA started harassing my wife, who at the time was a senior CIA officer, particularly over an op-ed I had written. They accused her of leaking classified information to me for the purpose of writing the op-ed. Well, I said I had gotten the information in the op-ed from two UPI reports and from a South American Ministry of Foreign Affairs website, and they would back off. But this sort of became our life. We would be under FBI surveillance. She would be called into the CIA's Office of Security. I would have trouble getting a security clearance when I went to Capitol Hill. It just became this pattern of harassment.
So, John, why didn't you stop?
Because I think that torture is something that needs to be discussed. I said this in 2007. This is something that about which we should be having a national debate. And frankly, I have a First Amendment right to free speech. And, you know, writing an op-ed is not against the law. Giving a speech about the Arab Spring or about torture is not against the law. And I felt that I didn't want to be cowed. I didn't want to be frightened into silence by the CIA.
And John Kiriako, you said that in these instances that you've named, you were actually charged with espionage. Is that right? Can you talk about the significance of the Espionage Act?
Yes, the government initially charged me with 3 counts of espionage. It sounds silly maybe, but I'm still personally offended by these espionage charges, which were dropped, of course. The espionage charge is used as a hammer by the administration to force people into silence. My espionage charge is related to a conversation that I had with a New York Times reporter. A New York Times reporter approached me and said that he was writing a story about a colleague of mine, and would I grant him an interview. I gave him the interview. I said this colleague was a great guy, the unsung hero of the Abu Zubaydah operation, terrific officer. And the reporter said, "Do you know how I can get in touch with him?" And I said, "No, I've been out of touch with him for a while, but I think I might have his business card." So I gave the reporter the business card. Now, mind you, this is a CIA officer who had never, ever been undercover. His business card showed that he was involved as a CIA contractor, and it had his personal email on it and his cell phone number. I gave the reporter the business card and was charged with 2 counts of espionage. I later gave the same business card to another journalist who was doing an article and was charged with a 3rd count of espionage.
What is it that you allege the CIA was doing for all of these years? Explain the torture program that you were trying to expose.
Sure. There were something like 10 different techniques that were used in the CIA's torture program. They went from the benign, where an officer would grab a prisoner by the lapels and give him a shake, all the way up to the really rough things that we've heard about, like waterboarding, or what I think is worse, sleep deprivation, or the cold cell, where they'll put a prisoner naked in a cell, chilled to 50 or 55 degrees, and then every hour or 2 throw ice water on him. I actually think those last 2 are worse than waterboarding. But again, these are techniques that we have condemned other countries for throughout history. The Japanese did this during the Second World War. The Belgians did it in Africa earlier in the century. The Chinese and the Vietnamese did it. These are techniques that we have always said were crimes against humanity. And then it was though after September 11th everything changed, and we somehow had license to do the same things we had been condemning. I thought that was wrong. You know, former Director Petraeus made a statement in October when I agreed to take a plea to make these other charges go away. And he said that my conviction shows that we have to take our oaths seriously. Well, I took my oath seriously. My oath was to the Constitution. On my first day in the CIA, I put my right hand up and I swore to uphold the Constitution. And to me, torture is unconstitutional, and it's something that we should not be in the business of doing.